Yeah, I was just thinking about like, man, it's so hard sometimes to stay out of politics. And I've really tried to make such an effort to keep the shared story apolitical. And I think I'm grateful that I was able to sort of do the magician video without mentioning Republicans and Democrats. And you could argue, like, yeah, that's a pretty political video, but I didn't want to trigger people, as much as I want to trigger people. I do. I don't, but I do. I'm conflicted. I'm going to trigger them in the right way, I'm going to own the libs and the Republicans. I talked about this the other day. I do think that our politics should grow, they do grow from our values. I want to try to normalize having political conversations in the context of spirituality. Like, I don't know how to get there, but maybe this is part of me trying to figure that out. I see how it poisons things, though, and I guess it is how you go about it. And I'm not always the most adept person being able to navigate that, but I have taken it on as like a challenge to try to be able to be better at that. And I work with like 50, 60 people who all, are varying all over the political spectrum. And even in my last few jobs, I felt like I was trying to sharpen my ability to like be able to talk to people about contentious things without triggering them. And on a personal level, like I found, like, and you could tell me if you recognize this in your own personal life, but like, it's like you're trying to point out something to someone that they might be sensitive about. Like, let's say, somebody's not living right, whatever it is. You don't have to talk about their mistakes. Like I found, all I have to do is talk about my own stupid mistakes. I don't have to address their mistakes. I can tell them, like, I used to do X, Y, Z, and here's why it was bad for me, and here's what I realized. Get into sometimes contentious debates, and I found that, don't make it about the other person. Make it about yourself. Like, I discovered these things, like not telling people what you think they should believe. It's like, well, I believe this because of this, this, and this, and this is how it's affected my life for the better. You don't even have to talk about them. And if they're tuned and you can talk about them without talking about them, they'll pick up on it and they won't get all butthurt about it. They'll just, hopefully, take the lesson to heart. But I have found all these lessons are like dreams in a way. You can have a big revelation with somebody. You could be talking to someone and they say something that's just mind-blowing to you, that really you think, oh man, this is going to change the way I think. But if you don't return to it, it will just fade into the past like a dream. And I feel like that is where, especially for people who come to religion as adults, they didn't have it during their development. Religious practice becomes a huge thing. And, people develop their own religious practices, whatever it is. For some people, it's like, there's like the wellness strategy or whatever. There's like all these different strategies people try to, self-affirmations. I'm not a big fan of that kind of thing, but people try all sorts of ways to, throughout the day, take a minute to practice some type of centering activity. Or for a lot of Christians, it's like, yeah, they might bust open their Bible and spend 5 minutes a few times a day. In Islam, 5 times a day. You got a whole ritual 5 times a day. Get out this little rug, face Mecca, say this prayer, repeat this sort of mantra in your head. And it's not something you just do in 2 minutes. It's like you have to take the time. You have to take a deep breath. You have to walk away from what you're doing 5 times a day. And I think part of this is because Islam is a pretty, if you're a fundamentalist, you better be doing that. Because that's how hard it is. You don't want to have sinful thoughts. Well, you better be doing something 5 times a day. And I found that, for me, I need to do those things 5 times a day, or yes, I crack. I need a religious practice in my life. I can't just blow it off. Or else, start getting too frustrated with things, start getting angry at work, start making people around me miserable because I'm angry. I went through a lot of this before I woke up because I owned a business, and I had a bunch of employees working for me, and I made half of them miserable because I was miserable. And it's a hard thing to be around someone who's constantly miserable. And that was definitely me, back in those days. The only way I can stay away from that, falling back into those patterns, is through some type of religious practice, and for me, it might just be a silent sort of mantra that I have to go through in my head. It's not unlike the Islamic ritual of, facing Mecca, saying this prayer. Sometimes I feel like my practice should be a little more involved. Have these periods through the day where if you do have old patterns that you're trying to shake, sometimes it might be like every couple hours you might need to do something to shake yourself out of those patterns, And I think for people who are really suffering, like, you got to break up your routine. You need some type of ritualized behavior to sort of help discipline you into breaking this pattern, this looping pattern of mental merry-go-rounds.